And we are online. Yeah. Well, do you maybe want to continue with what you were talking about before we stopped the recording so I can
Sure.
test
Do you
the
want
recording?
to actually use some of that, or should we start from the beginning, like talk about what we were talking about?
Yeah, talk what we
Okay.
were talking about.
Well, we left off at people knowing the truth, but their ego in public settings won't allow them. This reminds me of something that we spoke about, where when you've been in public settings, people judge you because you are so different to their group that's the herd mentality. If you I've actually noticed this in
Yes,
social
exactly.
conditioning wherever we've been, right? We met in Phuket. You've traveled around Thailand. I've lived here for 3 years. People will complain about their home country, yet they'll gravitate back to the people from their home country when they come to Thailand, when they travel. So what it is
Yeah, they take
correct.
themselves
And
with
so, like you
themselves.
said, they are angry about something, but it cannot be the external world. It said internet connection, but now we're good.
Yeah, now
Yep.
now
You can
we
edit
back.
that part out.
It's going to be fun.
For
Well,
sure.
yeah,
All
let's
right.
keep talking.
Throw me another one. Let's go. Well, you were the one that
Doing
started with the topic of people and the social conditioning about how they know the truth. But this goes back to what we talked about. This is Carl Jung's shadow work, right? We create a second identity within ourselves to process everything that we're thinking, the things that we would never dare say out loud, but we still think them, we still feel them. The problem is sometimes that shadow decides to shine its light and we say and do really fucked up things. Again, if you don't regulate that, then whose responsibility is that, right? That's why I'm not going to say specifically male female relationships, but there's always in some sort of social dynamic, friendships, whatever. There's always a higher and a lower, a dominant and a slave, a masculine and a feminine. That's just the roles that people play. But if that masculine energy or that domineering personality is actually an unresolved person, they're gonna project their hatred, their anger, their own insecurities, their issues onto the moment. That's what you were dealing with recently.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't matter which role they're using as an excuse. It's just an excuse because they are too afraid to
Correct.
be themselves.
And then, like we talked about, social media doesn't make this any better because as we walked around Thailand, we saw it. There are the people who are genuinely enjoying Thailand for the real world experience of putting your feet in the sand. And then there's everybody else that comes here for the Instagram post, for their selfie lighting. I mean, again, multiple times, especially when I lived in Samui, people would walk to the beach, they would set their tripod up, they would then set up the perfect scene. Then they would take their tripod and go back to their hotel. 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. So you traveled on a plane, depending on where you're from. In the United States, it's like a 20-hour flight. For Germany, what is it? Also something like 15, 16 hours or something. Okay.
11 hours to
And you
Bangkok.
traveled all the way there just to get that perfect photo so that you could look important in the eyes of other people. Why don't you just come to Thailand and chill on the beach? But my ego isn't being stroked while I'm on vacation. How will people know?
I'm afraid to miss out on recognition
Yeah,
and validation. Herd mentality, definitely. Yeah, I feel like social media also, or let's say the technological development or evolvement in the past 20 years definitely has a lot of potential and benefits. Also, our brains are not really developed to catch up with the speed
correct.
technology evolve. And that can also cause a lot of issues within the brain. And we can see that because, I think it's fair to say that, let's say, mental illnesses have absolutely increased within the last, well, didn't look at the statistics, but definitely within the time
I did
we
look
had
into it.
digital
I did look into it. They can
development.
pin it down to the exact moment. I believe it was September 2009 is when social media, specifically Facebook, was available on mobile devices. That is the moment they determined that. And remember, like we've talked about, psychedelics and hard drugs. If you're already predisposed, like you have the mental issue within you, and these drugs bring it out of you, then how is social media any different? If it's already embedded in you and then this is the substance that you take and it pulls it out of you, and you make another good point that I want to go back to. I heard a wonderful quote. We are actually closer to our ancestors from hundreds to thousands of years ago than we are to this future reality that we're about to enter into, where our every moment is dictated by some sort of digital technology. So like you said, our brains are not wired for this. Our existence is not wired for this. Well, yeah, our even
Genetically.
daily lives. Why do we feel like we're constantly behind? How has that been embedded in our head? I need to do this podcast. I need to do this. I need to do this.
Because there's a gap in between who we are and who we try to be.
If I know anything about philosophy or even spirituality, the objective should be to try and be nothing. And I'm not saying nothingness like be a loser. I'm saying remove the ego and then watch the world come to you. But instead, our capitalistic, our Western-driven society says you must go get it. You must take what you deem as yours. And we talked about this on our phone call, which is perfect for this podcast in terms of, in America, we promote the individualism mindset. But if everybody has an individualism mindset and they're all succeeding at it, how do you get 333 million people to stand in line if they're all trying to stand in the first place? Exactly.
It's impossible.
It's a zero-sum game. And that's the part that nobody understands. It's like, well, if we all just work together as a collective, yes, but then there's always going to be, it's all a lie.
It's a lie.
It's always been a lie. That's the best part.
And that pretty much is a very good example to the question I posed in the beginning, how people are able to run away from the truth. I don't know how, but I kind of want to go more into depth into that, like how people maybe also to the very basic and original mechanisms that allow that illusion to take place, the divergence between real truth, or at least the path to seek real truth, and the lie people tell themselves. Because the deeper you go into psychology, I mean, you can also discover very positive, very promising parts, but there's also the devil, the potential of the devil in all of us. Some people might probably or maybe don't want to hear that, but maybe we can also elaborate on that just for like the listeners who just came in, so they are not too confused. But I mean, it is really like the deeper you go in psychology, the more confusing it gets, and you really start to ask yourself, how is that even able to happen? It's
so
really
again,
crazy.
we're on the same path. I wouldn't say that I'm that much further ahead of you, but I'm definitely, because again, I have more free time than you do. This is what I figured out. We have been born into a system that was developed millennia before we ever could grasp it. And what I mean by that is what time of day it is, what day of the week it is. This is all dictated by the Gregorian calendar, right? But this
Gregorian
is
calendar?
that 7 days a week, 30 and 31 days in a month. Because if you think about it, even in Thailand, the Thai calendar is 564 years ahead of the Gregorian calendar. And the reason behind that is the Buddha walked on the earth 564 years before the prophet Yeshua, who, we obviously whitewashed into Jesus. But when we are born into this system that our parents were born into, that our grandparents were born into, all of the conditioning is already pre-conditioned. I mean, the preconditioning is there. So when people like you and I, the intellects, the people who are listening, really dive deep, when they ask themselves that question that I told you I asked myself, right? Remember this test that I gave you, and now we'll say it, for the podcast listeners. If you take a moment and you close your lips and you say the word happiness in your own head, the question is, who said it and who heard it? That is who you really are.
The grandma from next door. No, I'm kidding.
So why would the grandmother next door say happiness? But anyway, so if that is the true essence of who you are, that is your internal voice, that is the person that asked the question, how deep are you willing to go? The human experience, the human existence is the most profound of all creatures. And what I mean by that, that's not to minimize the more intelligent creatures like elephants and dolphins. That is to say one specific quote that I've been saving for this podcast that I came up with, I believe. We are the only species on the planet that can journal. And yet 99.9% of the world's population does not journal. So how can we even remotely start to think that we can process our own thinking, our own existence, and our own conditioning to see how deep this really goes, right? We've got some of the best psychologists in the world, but you also know there is, who is it? Sigmund Freud's grandson, Bernays, I think, when
What
he
Bernays?
was working for American companies. If you really want to pinpoint where this went off the rails, it was when this deep understanding of psychology became a very specific pinpoint, and we all now look through that pinpoint. That is capitalism, that is money, that is why we all act and talk and walk the way we do.
Do you want to deep dive into that a little bit?
I mean, I'm happy
Elaborate
to.
that
Do you
a little
have
bit?
thoughts and questions? Because again, we've touched on this topic before.
When you said that when Edward Bernays started getting engaged into like pretty much marketing and influencing people psychologically, how that exactly formed people's psychological perception of themselves, of other people,
So,
and of
okay,
the world.
from my understanding, Sigmund Freud went really
Yeah.
deep into Sigmund Freud's stuff was about sexuality, right? Where Carl Jung, when him and Sigmund Freud had their falling out, it was because Carl Jung went a different route and said that it can't always be sexually based, right? Like Sigmund Freud went off on the tangent that like the son always wants to have sex with the mother or something like this, right? It was incredibly limited,
Yeah.
but I understand it at the time.
He really, everything for him was predicated, originated in the sexual drive or the realization of
Sure,
sexual
and I'm
pursuit.
wondering if written at that time and of all the cases, maybe that was also a time in history, right? This is the way in America they justify things like using the N-word and stuff like that. Oh, it was just a time in history where like everybody was doing it. So if that is really what Sigmund Freud discovered, and that's what he believed, maybe that was his case study, that was his batch. But the grandson, Bernays, was actually hired by advertising and marketing agencies all across America. The same way social media now,
Fortress of
knows
freedom.
the exact way to get you to manipulate. Okay, example. TikTok last year, I believe, got people to sand the bottom of their upper teeth so that they were flat, but using like a nail file. Okay, that same psychology, that same medium, just rewind it all the way back to Bernays' days. Coca-Cola, the U.S. Army. I mean, if you want to go deep dive, really go into how the CIA controls the advertising, because what happens in America gets exported around the world, right? So when people, again, people like you and I, we go against the narrative, not because, and that's the funny part. People think that we do what we do, our existence is just to piss people off. No, pissing people off is
that we were rebellious, egoistical, rude,
correct,
disrespectful human beings. But that's their narrative because they look at it through a lens of,
why can't you just fall in line?
much.
Right. We never set out to piss people off. It just so happens that when we walk into the room, people are pissed off. That's not my fault. But if their mindset is, oh, well, why can't you just do it this way? Well, why can't you just do it this way?
Well, I can tell you why we cannot do it this way, because I really believe that it gets us into missing real human potential and we're just behaving like...
Correct.
sheep.
That's why, 100%. That's why.
It's meaningless, and that might trigger a lot of people that I'm just saying it's meaningless. And maybe we can also a little bit elaborate on that. So I can maybe also explain why I think that it's meaningless. I mean, it's fair enough to explain to some people who maybe haven't dived into those topics yet. So just to give them a little hint to understand what we're talking about, because otherwise they might feel a little screwed, which I can understand. I think where many people are going right now is not the individual purpose. Everyone has a certain, maybe also we can discuss about that, predisposed also by genetics, but everyone has, let's put it in like a divine way, a Holy Spirit. And in the end of the day, to put it in easy terms, it's about love, self-love, and projecting that self-love out to the world. And what people are currently doing, especially, I don't know if there's really any country in the world where you can say, oh, those people are really in pure love, like where the average person, maybe
I was
you
just going
find
to
that in
say it's
Bhutan, but I'm
Bhutan.
not
I
sure. I
know
haven't
it's
studied
Bhutan,
Bhutan.
bro. It's Bhutan, 100%.
Maybe it's Bhutan. Yeah, I should visit that place,
No, but I
definitely. Have
want
you
to
been to
go. I
Bhutan yet?
think if I go, I'll never come
Yeah,
back.
you get lost. You will turn into some
I'm
spiritual
ready.
monk. No, I just think that currently what people are living is an illusion and a lie, which is not predicated on love. I talked with my dad a little about that yesterday. I talked with him about feminism, and feminism pretty much reflects what I believe, what we're just talking about. And this is actually just, it's a role. What you said 10 minutes ago, that it doesn't matter which role we're taking, it's just an excuse so we don't need to be ourselves. Because actually, if you go into developmental stages of childhood, it's about getting loved and accepted. And I watched a little extract from a podcast yesterday. It was a German guy, and he's called Veit Lindau. For German listeners, Veit Lindau, you can check it out. And what he talked with his daughter, and that was actually pretty impressive. So because he said, I am sorry that I imposed my authoritarian way of raising up children onto you, because I just looked at the world from my lens, and you were just a part of that lens, but I did not take another lens in order to be able to see your needs. And I can also see that, like, in the upbringing from my parent generation. I mean, I also can see that in my parents. I can say that. I mean, they're gonna listen to that, but I can
Tell the truth.
there are also
Tell the
a
truth.
lot of
This is
other
your
people. Yeah, there are also a lot of other people, also my grandparents, who come from that point of view. You are an egoistical son of a bitch if you don't fit in, but they don't question too much the origin of their system, and they just assume that it's the right way. And if you don't verge into that direction, that you are automatically
Do you see
a traitor.
Yeah, do you see
I
where it
think they
starts though? If everybody falls in line, that theory that you just said, from your grandparents to your parents to you, becomes incredibly reductive. If the program was the other way, which was expansive, tell me who you are, tell me what type of musical instrument you want to play, hand the kid a pencil, a pen, and a paintbrush and go, hey, go crazy. But what do? It goes the other way. Fall in line, do it this way. This is the way my father did it. This is the way his father did it. So it actually removes it from the beginning. This is why the shadow gets created. What you said earlier is spot on. The answer is love. It has always been love. And it starts with self-love. But if you are dealing with hatred inside, and remember, we touched on this in one of our first conversations when we met in person. When I pointed out to you that everybody in Thailand that's coming to visit looks like Drake, and you're like, why is that? And I said, because of social media and because nobody knows what character they want to pick. And now that they're adults, now that they're out of the view of their parents or their social situation in whatever country they came from, now they can get braids and extensions and they can cut the beard perfectly. Good, if that's what you want to do. But have you ever asked the question, why do I want to do this? Right? I'm rocking this look specifically like we talked about. I'm trying to look like a 1990s like Indian movie star. I picked the hairstyle, I picked the mustache,
from
totally.
India. You
Right.
must be
And then
from
I open
India,
my mouth
Suresh.
and then the minds get blown.
They're like,
But
he's
that's the
American.
other part. They actually just think that I either got trained linguistically in America or that I'm some super genius. But
No, man, you're from the
exactly. I
CIA. You
blew my
understand.
cover on this podcast. But the whole thing the root for me is when I picked, or when I asked myself the question, how deep does this really go? So when I went,
It's a very good, it's a very
right,
profound question,
the
very
existential question
question.
that came from that happiness thing that I said earlier too. When I said in my head, happiness, I had to ask, who asked it, who heard it? But now add that element. I asked myself, lips closed, how deep does this go? And the response voice in my head said, how deep are you willing to look? And that's when this tailspin started. And honestly, man, it's been the best trip of my life. That to me is what human existence really is. It is how many journeys you can go on.
Can you make
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you maybe for the listeners explain a little your background? And I mean, you're pretty sane now. Let's say you did a challenge, or you succeeding is not the right word. That's too Western, but yeah, let's say you mastered a mission most people are way too afraid of, and that's exactly why we have those Western conditioning going on, because I mean, I can also see that resistance in myself, and I'm also afraid of the journey, but I'm kind of getting into it. And in the end, you're going to find out that the fear is just an illusion. Anything is an illusion, also maybe it's just the truth.
So yeah, I
Who
appreciate that.
knows?
I'll get into my background here in a second, but I want you to know, and your listeners to know exactly what you said. So the hero's journey is a very real thing. And at the beginning of the hero's journey, you can actually see that there is a resistance to the calling. We all have a calling inside, right? When we were all living in villages and it took a village to raise one child, let's say like the Native American villages, where a boy would leave the village and go into the wilderness, whether it was to kill a bear or a wolf or to become a man or whatever, and then he would return. We don't have those challenges in life anymore. And so we have those challenges now as our existential crisis. But there's never been a period in human history where it has been more convenient to avoid that question, to avoid that challenge. Ponder on that, and then I will start with my background. So we didn't do an introduction, but my name is Suresh. I was born in the United States. My parents are from Malaysia, and my grandparents are from Sri Lanka. So I've got a bit of a nomadic bloodline. I moved to Thailand in 2021 during COVID lockdowns, especially that I was living in the United States. I was living in Portland, and then I moved to Austin, Texas, and that was a very uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
So Austin, pre-lockdown, was a very fun town. They call it the live music capital of the world, but you have to remember, in America, we called everything the world.
Isn't it like the town of aesthetics in the USA and creativity?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of artists. There's a lot of, it's everything is there,
Yes.
which is great.
Rogan is based
Exactly.
there.
But COVID lockdowns, COVID everything in Texas was a wild experience. So when I Google searched countries that were open during the lockdowns, there were only 5 countries that were open. And since I had already been to Thailand, which was one of the 5, I just decided I'm buying myself a one-way ticket, keeping in mind that I would need to return for my brother's wedding. So I left in September 2021. I returned in February 2022. And I can tell you, between losing 17 kg for our world listeners and our American listeners, that's about 30 pounds. Walking on the beach, drinking coconut water, fresh, eating fresh Thai food. And what's funny is, as I returned to the United States, not only did my brother not recognize me, and this is actually what my ebook is about, which is that selfless promotion I'm doing right now. I changed my reality by asking myself that very existential question. And what's interesting, and I want to thank Vincent for actually bringing this up, it is not a linear journey, and it is not a journey that you ever stop. You can take breaks, you can look around, you can find yourself in Thailand, you could find yourself in Bhutan, you could find yourself back home in Germany or in America. But know that once you open that can of worms, there really isn't any going back. And it's been the greatest awakening of my life. The more I accept that this human experience is partially predetermined by my thoughts and my feelings, which is where we're going to get into some stoicism. But for the most part, the external world is just reflecting what your internal world is doing. And so if your internal world is chaotic,
It's throwing
correct. And
triggers
one
at
of the
you.
best things that I did for myself was to actually come here calm. And we did touch on this, Vincent, you and I. The first time I did 30 days of isolation is wildly different than this time that I've had recently in my life, which started in November. It's now February. This has been more like solitude. This is closer to, like I mentioned to you, Walden, where I interact with the world, but on such a calmer level.
You're not in
Correct.
resistance.
I'm letting the world show me where I need to work on in myself. So when the random person, Again, it's Thailand, land of smiles. But when the random child smiles, when the random dog walks with me, when I do a morning beach walk, this is the world actually reflecting, going, hey, you're good inside. But when you're out in the West, when it's just so saturated by sound and color and smell that you can't get a grip on what's actually happening, that is actually the internal world sending you a signal. It's time to slow down. It's time to take a beat and go sit somewhere. And why is it that we always feel so much better when we're in nature? Exactly.
Presence.
There is no better place on the planet to be present than in nature.
We originate from nature.
We touched on this,
sense.
right? The seed. The DNA of a tree is already in the seed. The DNA of who you are is already within you. You must put yourself in a situation where you can bloom, where you can blossom. This is where the saying comes from, don't go where you're tolerated, go where you're celebrated. I feel like I'm celebrated here. Not because I'm some superstar, but because people are just looking around and smiling.
Maybe they acknowledge more just
right,
human.
Because I don't know Germany specifically. I've never been, but let's say the United States. People
currently don't
exactly. This is what everybody says, but this is what's happening in the U.S. If people look at you, they don't smile. If they look at you and you look at them too long, they're ready to either shoot you or make some sort of grand gesture to like call attention to it. There used to be
they get into defensive mode because they feel
correct,
threatened.
And so what is that, right? What did we talk about on our call? If viewed through the lens of compassion, ... So if we, the awakened ones, have to walk around and just put these lenses on and we just see compassion, when this person is being mean to children, to animals, to themselves, to their siblings, to their spouses, you can actually see who they really are, who hurt them, where they were missing their childhood love or attention or feedback. In the way they're treating the person negatively, that is what they got from their up. Boil it all the way down.
Yeah, just a projection. I mean, anything is a projection. Sometimes people might think that projection is connotated in a negative way, but projection is actually neutral. You project all the time, but it depends what you project. If you project like anger, jealousy, hatred, revengefulness, or love, compassion.
That's exactly correct.
You know?
And again, remember, if you project that out there and you're not immediately getting that back, you can also not take that personally. You have to then view the person and go, oh, this might be beyond my scope. But you're absolutely right that when people go out and pick conflict, when people, they talk about how if they had any luck, it would only be bad luck or something to this effect. That, again, is the lens you're looking at the world through. That's your own chaotic perception. I've said this to you. I said this to Olaf as well, our other mutual friend. When you're stuck and you know you're stuck, I try to repeat this phrase, change the channel. Just elevate up a little bit. If you hate the Weather Channel, if you hate MTV or whatever, change the channel. If you don't want to see these people in Phuket or you don't want to see these people in Samui, change the channel. Don't be a dick. Don't subscribe to it. Don't be a reflection of that environment.
Cancel 100%.
You know me, I'm subscription free. I've unsubscribed from life, man. Bhutan, here I come.
Yes, see you in Bhutan. Yeah, what I was about to say, when you said that people might get into that mode or something is bad luck. People are so biased and attached in the way they view the world. And this is not a generalization. It's a certain proportion of people, because maybe someone will say, oh, he's quantifying it to the maximum. I mean, there's always a statistical distribution, right? So it's not everyone, but there's a tendency of people who are stuck in their own mind, and it is significant because you can feel that energy in the Western world. So it means it's big enough of a problem to say that it's omnipresent and that it's affecting many people's life, and that it's definitely worth talking about it and dealing with that topic and questioning why, going to the root, and also suggesting solutions, at least for the people who want to hop on, because I don't feel that many people want to hop on the train, and that actually, well, that many people, that what we talked last time about, that some people just don't want to
Correct.
be happy.
Remember, some people only exist on this planet as a reminder for us to be like, yeah, let's not do that, or let's not be like that. It does suck, but it is the truth. And remember, yeah,
Do you think that they really don't want to be happy, or they can't be happy because they are too afraid? Or do you think there is a chance that they can actually find the will and the strength to walk that path? Or do you think that might sound very deterministic, but just want to bring
I
up
love
that
the
question?
question. I love the question.
Or do you think that some people are really not able to be willing to go that path, that they cannot develop the free will to go through that path to achieve happiness? And that's probably going to get me into a lot of
I think
trouble
it's
asking that question. It's the first episode, but the podcast is about truth. It's not about convenience. So
that should be the
weeds
catchline
straight
for the
away.
podcast. So note that in your edit. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
We are all created in such a way, right? The fabric of the human DNA, whether people want to get into the religious part of God, right? Religion is the store-bought version. The God stuff, the essence of, is inside of you. Whether you can undo the conditioning to find the truth of for yourself, that is what you said, the willpower. There are people, like you said, you and I ask the question and understand the question. The more I know, the more I don't know. But that's not an uncomfortable truth for people like us. I'm excited by what's behind door number 1 or door number 2. But most people are afraid that if they don't know the answer, and this starts not only in regular psychology in school, meaning there is when you're wrong at home. Your parents tell you, hey, don't do that, but they never give you the option of what they would prefer you do. Nurture and nature.
System.
But when you go to school and the teacher asks the class, okay, class, what's the capital of Germany? And nobody raises their hand, but everybody's nervous. And then the teacher picks on one person. That person feels more compelled to make up an answer that could be wrong and then stick to that answer so that they don't seem stupid or wrong to the group than to just say,
conditioning.
I don't know.
Or maybe ask a
like what we would
question.
do.
That's what school should be
Correct.
about, asking questions.
But
why,
I do, the German schooling system is the one that got exported to America because it is perfect to make workers. Our education system has nothing to do with educating free thinkers. Our education system in the modern world has everything to do with conditioning obedient workers, just smart enough to pull the lever, just stupid enough to not realize that they're in a fucking concentration camp. And when people like you and I look around, this is a shout out to all the ADHD kids and all the ADD kids who remember, who all looked at their parents and were like, wait, so I just want to spend another hour with you, or I just want to be here with you. But then I see that you have to leave and go to a place. Oh, a job. Well, do I have to get a job one day? Yes, 100%. Well, why?
Otherwise, you need to feel guilty.
Do you see how the system works? The system is embedded in our birth. And then there are people like you and I who always would ask the question, why? And I wasn't asking the question why to be a dick or to be annoying. I was a curious person. And then who knew that in the 2020s, that the most reliable source of information would become Wikipedia? Do you remember in like 2003 when Wikipedia was the most mocked website where they're like, oh, anybody can just upload information? Yeah. But that's a place for the truth, where somebody would post something and they'd be like, that's incorrect. You have to fix that. Whereas now we have Facebook where they're like, oh, 2 + 2 is 5. And all these sheep are like, yes, is 5. No, people like us exist on the planet. We ask why. We ask why our parents had to leave us every day. We asked why. Again, we're closer to our ancestral past, where we were born and raised in villages, than we are to this future world.
Can I say something about the ADHD?
It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, really. Maybe we can also get into some biology in regards to the brain. I mean, so I have a friend, he's studying, I don't know how you exactly translate it from German to English, but he's just studying to be a teacher, to put it into simple terms. And he's teaching a class right now, and and that's very alerting, and that's why I'm bringing it up. I saw him in November, and I think he will listen to that, and he knows that I'm citing his statement that in his class there were 5 children who have ADHD, and there was one child was like this all the time, all the time. And after class, he was like, "Why are you being so, let's say, nervous or uncontrolled?" The child couldn't even look him in the eyes. And now we can ask, I mean, you already kind of initiated it by indirectly questioning or pretty much directly questioning the education system. They say, "Oh, you have ADHD, you need to take Ritalin." I also used to be but if I will resolve my trauma, I'm going to be less nervous. But I always used to be very energetic, let's say. To put it in, and I do that on purpose, into a neutral connotation, I used to be an energetic child. And that is good. It's good to be an energetic child because that bears the embracement of potential.
You're supposed to have a childhood.
So, and what they do, they label that energy or being so energetic and also enthusiastic, because I think energy is also not only but also based on enthusiasm, which is good. It's drive to create, to ask, to be alive. And what they do is first of all, they label those children. You have ADHD. So they label them with a disease. I talked to another guy. I met him in Thailand, and he had some severe trouble also mentally. I also asked him to come on the show. Well, he didn't really get back to me. Maybe he will come later. Would be good if he wants to. He's invited. If he's listening to that, he knows that I mean him. Probably you're always welcome. You made good statements. And what he said is, no, I lost track. No, what did he... Well, so what he actually said is that he thinks that the medicine they give children, they also gave him medicine that can really cause damage to the brain, especially when there's a developmental phase. When you're young, I haven't studied Ritalin too much, but I think if you give Ritalin to a person, for example, to me, my parents gave Ritalin to me once, but they stopped because I got very quiet. They said, I said that on purpose. "Oh, he is weird." And I use the term weird, or maybe extraterrestrial, however you want to put it, or like an alien. I don't want to say aliens are bad, but like just to illustrate what I want to say. And they said, "Oh, he's weird." And maybe we don't want to say in general that Ritalin shouldn't be used, but it can happen that it shuts down certain areas of the brain.
This is a
Those
given.
areas
For sure.
need to be shooting. That can cause inflammation, under-excitement of brain areas, miscommunication of neurons. Maybe neurotransmitters are not going to produce the way they should be produced. Maybe, I don't want to, on the scientific point, I don't want to make any wrong statements, but it could be that Ritalin, for example, shuts down your frontal cortex a little bit, and your frontal cortex is really important for development because it's a way how you think and question and how you govern through the world. And if that gets shut down at age 6, maybe, first of all, it's not going to develop fully. Maybe it's not going to grow completely. Yeah, I mean, that's not going to be good. You need a frontal cortex, that's for sure. Also 100%. Also for impulse control, if it's, and for regulation of fear, because it probably also interacts with the amygdala. And if it's not, the amygdala is in the center of the brain, it's for fear response. When somebody pulls a gun, okay, amygdala gets activated, fight and flight. And probably it also controls, interacts with the amygdala, and what can happen by maybe, I'm not saying 100% because I have not, I mean, I read a lot of stuff, but I'm not 100% sure if this is wrong. Okay, I'm sorry, guys, because I don't want to have a debate right now. Oh, you made scientific wrong statements. So that maybe if the frontal cortex is not really regulated, amygdala or other brain areas uncontrollably shoot up, and that can, the way you navigate through life and the way you deal with triggers or any notion that comes in, that will have a devastating effect on your brain.
For sure.
Perception.
So for me, I went through the book Living with ADHD, and that book really opened my mind. So ADHD kids such as
Okay, we
us,
need to wait
we
for the
are the
internet connection again.
hunter-gatherers.
1
Looks like
second.
we're dead. Yep.
You will be back.
Okay, now we're back. For us ADHD kids, the Living with ADHD book for me, it was something else. Basically, it explains that we're the hunter-gatherers. We are the type that we have to be called to action to actually be motivated to do something. And so, like you said, whether it's, oh, he's weird, he's this, he's that. Ritalin, I think mine was Paxil. What these pills are supposed to do is they're supposed to sedate those that don't fit into the lane. Because remember, who needs us to fit into the lane? Who benefits financially from these pharmaceutical drugs? And then, as you said about the brain, if the brain is just free to develop on its own, I believe the frontal cortex or the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until 25 at the beginning.
Yes. You can still develop after
Definitely.
that, but as orientation, they 25. I mean, you have neuroplasticity. You can also, especially, I mean, the more you age, also, let's say, the more biologically you age, the more you also get conditions, the older you get. I mean, the faster you age.
Yeah.
The more difficult it gets.
I don't think you've proofread my book yet, because there's a neuroplasticity chapter. It's super simple because remember, my ebook is just a workbook, but there is neuroplasticity because I do agree with you. Just like I started training at the gym only 6 months ago, the brain can be trained. The best advice I have for people over 40 years old is learn another language or learn a musical instrument, because if you train the brain wants it. Thought, new activity is food for the brain. Don't just die at 40 because, oh, well, I have this job or I have this life. That is the time to thrive the most. But anyway.
People get bitter, resentful, stuck. Even more, the longer they stay in the matrix, also the more anxious the brain gets and the more into sustaining mode.
Well, and that's why, like we talked about, most people are afraid to face the truth at a young age because of the consequences. But then when you have the existential crisis, remember, Jesus died on the cross at 33. Siddhartha found enlightenment under the Bodhi tree when he was 35. This is that frontal cortex again. We all have some level of profound awakening in our 30s, because as I've entered into my 40s, this is my phase of I don't give a fuck. If people don't like the mustache, it's 270s for them. That's cool. I'm glad you have an opinion. It's new to me. I love it. But when you have these awakened thoughts, if you've given yourself the freedom, like again, I took myself off the meds when I was a kid because I'm like, look, I'd rather be the weird kid than to be the sedated kid. But I can see now in life, those younger kids, the other generation, after us, I think more in your generation. I hope we're reaching a broad audience with this first podcast, but we'll definitely do it again so we can reach out to everybody.
And well, I thought maybe we should also get Olaf on, because when you said you talked to Olaf and that he also talked about his emotional development, apparently he doesn't need to talk about his emotional development, but maybe if there's no technical issues, we can have a conversation, us three, and I want to do it so just to illustrate and show and inspire people that there are also people on the path of going against the stream, because some people might have the potential to question and to develop themselves, but they haven't found peer group for that yet, because they are swimming in the swamp of negativity.
I think your analogy is spot on. I think when you're in the stream, but if the stream is the swamp, then you get more of that. Because remember, a lot of the Buddhist enlightenment stuff, especially around here, is go with the flow. Go with the water. Let life happen to you. But like you said, those that are going with the stream in the swamp, it's just negativity perpetuating negativity. This goes back to the earlier point that you made. It is about love. It is about self-love. If everybody loved themselves just a little bit more, the planet would be so much more hospitable. The planet would be so much more tolerable.
Do you think holistic love on the entire planet is
it theoretically possible? Yes. In this dimension, in this timeline, fuck no. As a brown man, when you look at the white world, if a white man has to take land from a brown man for the white man to exist, but the brown man doesn't need to take land from anybody to exist, this is another existential problem. These Thai people have accepted me like I'm one of them. They don't even ask any questions. Hello. Saudi Cup. I'll take it down.
Yeah, it's probably the root of that problem is probably that people are
Sure.
territorial and defensive in their own existence. Do you think that evolution or evolutionary biology is a good explanation for all the primal things that are happening
100%.
currently in the
I
world?
think this is just the circle being completed. I don't think this generation of people wanted connectivity like this. I don't think this generation of people wanted to be globalized like this. I think people prefer their group, they prefer their herd, and I think we are being ushered along at an accelerated pace.
And that causes tribal
Yeah, because
problems.
everybody's looking for their tribe. Even like you said about Olaf looking for, his spiritual group. Everybody's looking for a group somewhere. There are individuals such as myself and like you.
You think it's impossible to find it because they are...
I think whatever frequency you're on, you will find your tribe. If you're a piece of shit with negative thoughts and feelings towards people and life and animals and the earth, you're gonna find people just like that. If you're on a path, Olaf and I, it was similar to when you and I met, man. We just looked at each other, did that typical head nod and a handshake, and it was like, I know, like we're good. And we've all stuck around. We're almost 1 year since we've all met, just so you know.
Yes. I actually texted Olaf yesterday.
I haven't. I think he's going to be in Thailand. He'll be in Thailand in 7 days.
Yeah, you told me. Yeah, in 7 days. Okay.
I'm going to try.
Are you going to see him?
He's coming here for a woman. That's a whole other topic. That's its own podcast episode. But I'm going to try. He's coming here to spend time with her, and then I think they're going to Japan. So I don't think I make the high priority list there, but it's all good.
You will see him again.
I didn't think I would see you again, and here we are.
Yeah. I think maybe this year we may even see in person. I actually thought about what you told me about going to another place. And I already went into the planning a little bit. I mean, I still need to make some money. But actually, Georgia might be a good place. Tbilisi, it's a beautiful city, the capital of Georgia. And it's not very expensive. For around 450, let's say, dollars, you can rent an Airbnb. And maybe that would be a good place just to, take some shrooms.
100%.
Just be by myself and to get all that shit.
See, that's what I was
going to
say just now, too. You will always find your tribe. But what if you want to change who you are fundamentally? You cannot do that while you're with your tribe, while you're with your crew. And again, shameless plug, but that is what my ebook is about. Solitude and isolation are some of the best things you can do for yourself when you're ready to really answer those existential questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I doing it this way? And you'll be happy to discover that most of the things that you have been taught were part of the preconditioning. And again, if this is part that we need to edit out because you don't want people to hear it, that's perfectly fine. At least we'll have it because we're not live right now. But if you want to keep it, I think it would be of benefit. When you explained to me that you took the neuroticism test and that you were 97%, but then when your own mother took that test and she was 90%, and remember what I said to you, if you are 50% your mother by genes, nurture and nature, what if the true you, if you remove the conditioning, if you remove everything that happened between, correct, and 7% neurotic is probably healthy.
That's nothing.
It's just a theory.
I guess a little bit of, but I guess a little bit of neuroticism makes sense because, you still can die. Our body doesn't want to die. So a little bit of that is okay. But once you get to 60, 70, you probably start looking at life through an interpretation that is too negative. And over-exaggerated, probably. Let's say, coupled from reality. Like you start over-accessing or over-interpreting.
I think for
reality,
me, if
probably
neurosis or neuroticism becomes your identity, if that's another label that you can add to the list of your identity, then I think it's actually a disservice. Because for me, that my understanding and my interpretation of Buddhism is the nothingness part. The nothingness allows you to never be labeled as anything. So
you could be anything
at
you
any
want
moment.
To be. You are something, but You can hop off the bus and hop onto the next bus without being afraid, because most people stay on the same bus, frozen and paralyzed
And then
the
you have to
entire time.
remember, like we talked about earlier, this triggers people. When they see people being authentic, when they see people who they deem having a better time at life, having more success at life, they actually are not interested in how did you do that. They're actually interested in shitting on it because they're actually upset. Well, how could they do it? How come I couldn't do it? Why am I a slave? You know, this is all a consent form, right? We can subscribe. We don't have to consent. I didn't have to come on this. That's
We
what I
get to
mean.
choose, that's
I
what
didn't
you're
have to
saying.
come on this podcast. I want to. I didn't have to pick Thailand.
Which I really
You're
appreciate.
very welcome.
Thank you, buddy.
For me, when I used to say this to people in school, it's all a choice. And again, there was always the, oh, well, breathing's not a choice. No, it's subconscious. But if you would like to consciously stop breathing, go for it. Either you'll accomplish it, and that's the end.
Yeah. The statement you need to breathe, that comes from the feeling of urgency that it's not okay to die. That dying
is a part of
painful.
life. This is where I subscribe.
You die every day, so what I observed, since I started questioning myself and also went into that psychological journey, I really found that also in German society, I really can detect that problem. There are people also, because of our history, people are afraid of death, and that's why they're afraid all the time, maybe. So they walk the entire path of life looking through the lens of death. So they have predetermined their life. It's like if you draw a line, and by the end of the line has a certain length. For other people, it's a couple of centimeters longer, and for other people, it's a little shorter. But they look at it, and then they make an orthogonal other line, which says death. And that's how they look at life. So also by their mindset, they predetermine and precondition the outcome of their life. And probably also mindset plays a role
100%.
in life expectancy. Have a sane mental spirit, you might live 10 years longer. If you don't, well, you're going to get sick. It will get manifested. You will get diabetes type 2, type 1, cancer, dementia, because dementia probably also has to do with fear, blockages in the brain. I mean, also, if you're afraid, you're not learning new stuff, because preservation is key in that moment. And then you're not going to induce neuroplasticity, which alters and increases the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, to put
For
it in
sure.
general, not just Alzheimer's. Also Parkinson's, for example.
This is what I mean. The roots, right? We talked about this on our phone call. Why can cancer not technically be cured? Cancer is unique to the host. If the host is going through, like you said, with a predetermined time of death, you can't fix that. That's what I mean. The mindset of, I know when the end is. I fear death. If you fear death, that means you're really not living. That means you're just waiting for your turn. And I don't understand that mentality. That's, again, shout out to the ADHD kids who called out all this bullshit when we were kids. Oh, well, you have to do it this way. Well, you have to plan for your death. Yeah, plan for your death.
Guys, you don't need to do
anything.
anything. To anyone listening who's struggling, you don't need to do anything. You have the choice. You don't live
Not
in a
yet.
dictatorship
Oh, yeah.
yet.
But what did I say to you when we met, my friend? When I saw you struggling, I saw directly in your eyes. I saw a good person, but I saw somebody who had a very hard time processing. And I remember what I said to you. Do you remember what I said?
Not literally,
Give me even
but
something to the effect of.
maybe.
I said, if not
Sorry?
literally, tell me if you can remember something to the effect of what I said to you.
Well, maybe you said that. Well, that
Something, it was very close to that. I looked at you when you were asking questions, and I could tell you were lost in all of the information you've ever been given in your life. And I said, what if I told you you didn't do anything wrong? And I remember you sat there, and what did you tell me? The next day you went for a walk, you had a little bit of a cry, you and everybody listening that has ever been punished for something that they didn't actually do. They had fear of their parents coming home and beating them or verbally abusing them for nothing.
Yeah.
This is my message to you. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a bystander in their situation.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine, we're currently not in touch, but he said, so it was a good, that was a good point, and pretty ironic also. He said, so you get born into that world and you don't have any influence on that. And then preconditioned people come around the spot and pretty much impose all that bullshit onto you. And you're like, what the
Exactly.
fuck are you doing? That's not your right. Like, what the heck is going on? Are you nuts, guys?
When I have thought
Yeah, good
about my
point.
own existence, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning when you asked me about a bit of an intro, imagine being a person who sounds like this on the phone and you could never determine where I was from. Not any part specifically of America, right? Because I speak with pretty much no detectable accent.
You don't have an accent.
I
Your English is
appreciate
very,
that.
very
And
clear.
then
Yeah.
you look the way I look, you travel the way I travel, right? So I'm a little bit of a digital nomad, a backpacker, but I wear button down shirts wherever I go. But then I keep up on the look and I keep up on the fitness.
Where's your
I'm
pink
wearing pink
shirt?
shorts, if that means anything to you. But today
Good.
is what? Friday in Thailand. So it's light blue day. Pink day in Thailand is Tuesday. But I'll bust out. If we do this on Tuesday, I got the pink flamingo shirt. Don't worry. But what I
Everyone, and some people are like,
totally, and
who's
that's the
that
other
gay
thing, right?
lord?
That's another label. A
Behave yourself,
well-dressed
you gay lord.
man in modern society apparently is either Italian or gay. What the fuck is this? I just like nice clothes.
Yeah, in the like from the conditioning side, a fuck is a real THUG is a real the rap, the gangster, the Drake one
Totally.
you referred to
I just, for
earlier in that
me,
conversation.
why would you want to be the same as everybody else? Right? So like again, I think I might have mentioned this. Like my love, like I
Yeah,
went to school to be a car designer. Like I love cars, I love drawing, I love all of this shit. But for me, when you are in modern society or even in the past, you'd see everyday cars, commuters, therefore getting to and from work. I get it. And then every now and then you see some sort of Italian sports car, right? Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Lamborghini, and it just blows your mind. Why would you not want to be that in society? Why would you not want to be that for yourself? I want to look like everybody else. I want to look like somebody who I've seen either in concert or on TV or on YouTube. I want to see who I see.
I think that kind of herd behavior also intensified
Social
within the
media.
last 20 years.
Social
Also with
media.
social media, again, to get back to social media, it also got easier because channel distribution got easier because it's more transparent. It's just sending
I've
signal
called
out and
this
that's
phase
it,
of human existence digital bernays because back in the day it was print media and then it became television, but now it's on your phone. Now the most frustrating part of the day,
Became more
100%,
efficient
and
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 faster and
in
more
everybody's
quantified.
hand. Before we had to look at a big screen. Now we don't have to look at anybody's screen besides our own.
That also turns us into, how would you say, discompassionate, egoistical people. It's about me. For example, I mean, let's take a stereotype.
I love
To gain some popularity
I love a good stereotype.
here. All those Insta womans. Not all of them. We're not going all in. But
Shout
if you
out
look
Bull
at them,
Burnham. You have to watch the whole segment that he did called Inside. He made it during COVID. But this comedian from America, his song called White Woman's Instagram, that I suggest everybody listen or watch this music video. It is.
okay, sure, I will look at it. And now we get to a point I really wanted to talk to you about because it's also really a problem nowadays and also very crucial for human existence, the relation between man and woman. And your take on what women struggle with. Maybe we can talk about now about, okay, the standpoint or let's say the origin or the original problem, what, let's say, when, how do I say that? Like the relationship of man and woman is very, well, how would you say? You know what I want to say?
Modern
It's very
times, you
messed
mean?
up.
Very contentious.
What do
I
you mean
feel
by
like
contentious?
everything, basically, at least from the American standpoint, right? Because this is also what I left from. The feminist movement in America started from a very well-rooted thought, right? Women were waking up to the fact that, again, maybe I need to preface, there needs to be a disclaimer here. Every woman listening right now needs to understand that every brown man on the planet is actually their ally, at least the intelligent ones, right? The ones that are not going to stalk you on the street or whatever. Because
Yes.
every problem that we have in the world today, and again, our host, God love his soul, but is also a white man. When white women in America started to wake up to the fact that they are also a part of the enslavement, right? Past generations, ancestral, women played a certain role that had no labels. But during World War II, when the American man was out fighting wars, women took over, right? Working factory jobs, running the household, everything. But then when the men came back, they had to return back to their enslavement. And this is where it really took off. But you have to remember that as a brown man, born into an American society, observing this same behavior 40, 50 years later after the war, black men came back to America after they were treated like kings and gods in Europe, right? Chocolates and whatever. And Dave Chappelle quotes this in his comedy. It's hard to go back to sitting on the back of the bus in Mississippi when you were just getting your dick sucked in France by some beautiful white woman, right? So now, break that down. Remove the specifics, but look at the same execution of the plan. Women are capable of doing amazing things. Everything that a strong masculine man can do, probably not. But to a certain degree, yes. When people, these women, are told, well, go sit on the back of the bus, go back to your position. The men are here now. The white men are here now. This is when the feminist movement became weaponized. The problem is, just like any other movement that happens in America, it probably starts as a good cause. It has its good grassroots origins. And then when it becomes weaponized, then when it becomes mass media, then when it becomes popular, then you get the bad actors. Then you get the people who are doing it for their, 15 seconds of fame.
So you think the origin of feminism was rooted in a good intention?
Women should have the choice. Okay, so this is the shit, right? In America, they repealed Roe versus Wade. And I heard one of the best quotes. If this has nothing to do with you, maybe you should shut the fuck up. Meaning, women's abortion, women's health, women's rights, let's let women handle that. But this is not like, let's say, what, again, the American government likes to do. When Facebook, Meta, and Google basically say, well, we know we caused the problem, but we're going to go ahead and fix the problem. And Congress says, you know what, you're right. We don't know what you're talking about, but we'll let you fix this cyber everything problem. But they won't extend that same courtesy to women. Well, these are women's rights. Yes, but let's have a bunch of old white men who have been career senators tell us what we can and can't do with our body. When you think about the root of feminism.
So you're talking about separation.
Well, so what happened is they repealed Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade in America is the right to an abortion, like legally. But now that they've repealed that, women don't have the right to an abortion. So let's say in America.
They don't have the right to do
this was
abortion.
Repealed. Yeah, that's what I mean. So the root of feminism, to fight for women's rights, is no different than Black activism. Think about this. Black Panthers in America would go and feed people in Oakland and put together community services. But when you help the wrong minority in America, the real powerful people come and shut it down. So the root of feminism to me is actually pure, authentic. People should have a right. People should have a right to say and do whatever they want. Are there consequences? Yes. But if every time a woman says something, she is put down, minimized, marginalized, then women who fight against, especially men like me, again, for the stereotype, need to realize we are your ally. We deal with the same bullshit because now, especially, yeah.
It's a reminder.
Because we all are in a struggle in a certain capacity, unless you are the one in power. Because remember, if your truth offends somebody, really think about who has the power to tell you they're offended, right? If I tell you I'm offended, people will be like, man, shut the fuck up. Get out of here. Go home. Go back to India or whatever. Did I lose you? There you go. Okay.
No. I'm just listening. I'm
The
trying to
parallels. Okay,
understand
so let me,
what you
because
say.
your question was specifically about feminism. I'm trying to draw parallels as a person who cannot see it through a woman's perspective, but respects that a woman has her own perspective. Same like you're giving me the platform right now to speak my truth. Every woman should actually have the right to speak their truth. But if you really boil down
Absolutely.
feminism now in 2025, listen to the regurgitated nonsense and bullshit. So if we go back to the origins, the root, the original argument to me is very valid. Where feminism has gone now?
When did it take the wrong turn? What do you think?
2000s.
2000s? What happened?
So we have a gender pay gap in America. Do you have this in Germany? Do women get paid less for the same job?
No, they get paid
Right.
around
So
the
in
same.
America, it is blatantly clear that they get paid less. And this is their own way. Because again, you have to remember, this is still going to tie into feminism, but this is going to go into more specifics. Because in America, we also argue about racism all the time.
Yes, you
What
do.
this is.
I mean, since we had the immigration flood in Germany for 10 years, we also have been discussing about that. But I think you've been discussing about
Correct.
that for
Now, and here's
150
why.
years.
You have to remember that the upper class, let's put a line here, they allow us information so we can fight amongst ourselves. Feminism, racism, sexism, xenophobia, whatever. But if we were ever able to unite these people who are marginalized, this is not a race war. This is not a sexist war. This is a class war. And this is where we find ourselves in the world today. Because if we were smart enough to wake up, this is the French Revolution. This is where 95% of the world that owns nothing and the 5% of the world that tips their champagne glasses at us while we're infighting, there's no reason our class structure should be fighting amongst ourselves. I know we've gone into a different dimension now, but...
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, we are all humans. I mean, I think what happened is there was an ideology set up that people believe that some people might be more privileged than others, but maybe even some people who are more privileged than others by comparison and also by default think that those people who are less privileged than them by fact, like when you depends which standards you use to analyze that, but that they are actually more privileged than the people they compare themselves to. So I think we live in a world where everything is very twisted and where we don't really know what the truth is, and
that's
it's
on
also
purpose.
so much information.
Because if you think about it, I've actually met the Indian supremacists, I've met the white American supremacists, I've met the Thai supremacists, I've met the Russian supremacists, I've met the German supremacists. It's unbelievable because there is a subsect of every group, every culture, every region, every whatever, where they think they're the best. But I have to quote Mark Twain on this one when he said, if you don't leave your corner of the earth, you'll never know. Right? We have left our respective homes and we came to Thailand. You had a much different experience than I did. I came here and instantly knew this felt like home. But I wasn't polarized by the financial side because I also knew to get away from the tourist hubs. But there is a group here that believes that they're the best. Well, why do they think that? Well, they've never left here. They think they're the best.
It's also a very big problem. People blame open-minded people to be judgmental, but and this is that double morality that's happening nowadays. That is from a psychological point. It's also kind of like warfare. It's a strategic tool people use psychologically without even knowing that they, by the end of the day, judge people for behavior they extrapolate or they enact even more than those people they blame. And that's a big irony of the existence of our time. That's a big problem.
Because they have somehow anointed themselves as the truth tellers and that the other people don't belong or are liars. My openness is, again, like when we met and everybody I've met subsequently since, tell me your story, tell me your truth. And if I can hear that your truth sounds exactly like the last person I spoke to, then we don't need to speak because you are one of those people. That's not judgment. That's saving my time. But if I get to meet unique individuals like you and every other person I've met where we just see each other and we know, then I get to learn about a culture, a society, and a person on their authentic terms, right? Because when you meet the typical American, and I say this to people, and this is probably going to get me canceled, which I'm good with on the first episode. When you've met the typical white American, you have met them all. And I don't mean that to be insulting. I mean that because the conditioning worked. That means you hear the same bullshit, you speak the same bullshit. Correct.
Standardization.
And people like us, the ADHD kids, the ones that wander, the ones that have no direction in life, we're the ones that get to absorb the truth of the world. When you go land in some random city and people are just happy there, happy to see you, if you explore this Georgia idea, you have to tell me about it, because I have heard that they absolutely love foreigners because they want to know what is happening in the rest of the world.
I mean, I looked at pictures in Tbilisi and it looks very, very
I want to go.
Have you?
Let's do it.
Let's meet in Georgia. Yeah, man. It's pretty good. The US passport.
I think
ours
is out of the
right?
195 countries. I think we're good to go in 185 or something like that. I think we can't go to like Cuba and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it probably the strength of the German and US passports might be similar. What was I about to say?
You'll be doing a lot of editing, my friend. We have been on some topics and some journeys.
I don't know if I'm gonna do too much editing. I don't even know if I'm gonna edit that out when I say I don't remember what I wanted to say. I don't even know if I'm gonna edit that out.
This is your podcast. This is your medium. Let the world know who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's get back to the issue of the relationship of woman and man. Let's get into the weeds of that. What is the conflicting part when woman and man meet? Maybe, I don't know, you can lay it out the way you want to. Maybe first you go to the predication of man and then woman, the origin on the basis. And because if there's a woman and a man, both of them bring something to the table, and whatever they bring to the table conflicts. In the moment, it's a very negative conflict.
I think wherever the social dynamic and the family dynamic broke down, because women are emotional creatures and men are logical creatures. So when you think about the men and women,
you're
a little bit, but so think about it this way. You explained to me, and again, disclaimer, that you had an interesting upbringing with your mother and your father. Well, mine is incredibly similar as well. I watched a unresolved, emotionally driven mother take a happy-go-lucky, logical father and just turn his world upside down. And that's me telling my truth. If my family listens to this, so be it. This is the truth. But what I observed as a kid was that it does take a mother and a father to raise a child correctly. But it does take a mother who understands that when the child needs something, that kind side, that reassurance, correct,
carrying side,
right, and that is typically inherently a feminine quality. Let's get into the weeds.
Energy, yeah.
If there is a masculine woman and a feminine man and they end up together, then fine, the roles can be reversed. But if a woman sets out on a mission to minimize the man from her own ego, right? This is, again, back to the conditioning. This is why people like me will never have children. I see the people who have children now, unresolved men and women, having children who then are also unresolved from their conception. They wander in the world. They don't know why they treat women the way they treat them. They don't know why they treat men the way they treat them. The dynamic now, I would say this really started in the 80s, because I'm an 80s child. But when the world really turned upside down, September 11th, the war on terror, white versus brown, the global north versus the global south, whatever. That's where I actually see the starting point of the split of men and women. Because before then, it actually seemed like most people wanted to be unified in some sort of union. Whether it was a relationship with kids or a relationship without kids, you did want
traditional,
right, in some capacity
construction. And to some people that might sound masochistic again, but guys, that is not masochistic.
Right, we're just exploring a topic.
Please.
That's the part of this podcast, right? Like even I'll double down. This is about the truth. This is two friends speaking about the truth that they understand at this current moment in time. And any listener is
maybe
correct.
we're not right with everything. We are open to discuss that. We're not claiming any
correct. And that's the thing.
position.
All of your listeners are more than welcome to chime in with comments. I think they're able to come on the show and talk with you. The point that I'm trying to make, and I think that from your question is, where do I feel like, or where did I see it going off the rails? Because think about it. If my family is traditional, right? My ancestral line survived a lot, being pushed off the island of Sri Lanka, leaving Malaysia, whatever. This happened because a man took a role and a woman took a role, and then they started a family. And then a man.
They work together hand in hand
Right.
to create
Whereas
a divine outcome.
I think what happened
Creation.
is society, through its own programming and conditioning, gets people to focus on their three fundamental flaws instead of their three fundamental qualities or their positives, right? So instead of focusing on, hey, I'm really caring, I'm really empathetic, or, maybe for me, it's actually about opposites attracting. I think that some of the most beautiful relationships that I've ever observed are between a father and a daughter and a mother and a son. But that in itself, it's its own dynamic because, again, they're opposites. The father sees a bit of himself in this feminine daughter. That means he can recognize that there is strength and perseverance, but then he can also see, oh, there is that kind part of me that I could probably never be, at least in, let's say, American society, right? Because American society tells men, don't show emotion, you must always be a hero, always have your gun on you, blah, blah, blah. The dynamic between a mother and a son, I think it's the mother being able to look at the son and go, I did teach you correctly, meaning kindness, empathy, acceptance. And when I use both examples of father and daughter and mother and son, it goes back to where we started in this podcast and in this conversation, which is love. When you remove love from this dynamic,
About love.
the conscientious nature between men and women now, the dating game in the 2020,
it becomes maybe
100%,
nihilistic.
it's a competition that nobody's going to win. Why should a relationship?
Yeah, I really ask myself what people think, what they are gaining by playing that game. It must be the illusion or misaligned prediction of. Do you think that they still think that they're gonna gain love, but
unresolved?
but without
they'll never be happy. It's unresolved. That's why it's a competition.
Of course not.
Because
of course not. But what do they, if they look at a timeline, like everyone has a kind of a goal always, otherwise you couldn't exist. What do you think are they hoping to gain by that behavior?
I think because we live in such an instant gratification time, I think it's the ego stroke for the moment. No different than an Instagram like, no different than a Facebook like. They're treating the person this way.
So they are very contemporarily.
It's
like
it's transactional in my opinion.
Just
correct.
Focus
it's
on
transactional.
The next 5
what
minutes.
Can I get out of this? For how long? Until it starts costing me. As soon as it starts costing me, I'm out. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, that's why love cannot really exist and grow and flourish and be nourished, because love is an unconditional process that interchangeably happens. And if we're being egoistical, love cannot.
Love is no different than the seasons, in the sense of you have your fresh awakening in the springtime, right? Then you have thriving and growing in the summer. Autumn is where things kind of shed their skin. Winter is the cold. This is the cycles of love. This is the cycles of the human existence. But people have modified that, right? You can see animals in herds. You can see the way mother elephants treat the baby elephants. You can see the baby calf with the cow. You can see the way lion cubs. Yet somehow humans have fucked this up. You see what I mean? We are a product of our conditioning.
Yeah, we threw away, for no reason, we threw away our potential. Or at least we're covering it, like we're covering the seed. We're putting the seed by own choice
This goes
into the
back to
wrong soil.
this goes back to the consent
Even
thing.
though
We are all consenting.
if we look into an eternal, infinite, and neutral room, let's say the universe or space, it's like nothingness.
This is Buddhism.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't have too much to say, but it's nothingness, and we just come in with our lens of assumption that by the end of the day creates a very harmful, opposing battlefield for
Correct.
no reason. For no reason. Because people always, and that's a good point to make. People always think that what they believe is the reality, that it's determined. For example, I grew up in Germany, as you know. And Germany, you learn that label that Germany is the country of wealth, creation, like creation of economical value. And I always thought that this is our identity and that keeps us sane and safe. And but you start realizing that this is actually just a concept that is being proclaimed as a given reality. There's actually not really a reality. I don't know if our brains are limited to experience. I mean, people claim that we have explored our origin, and actually that's a good next point to what I just made up. I will come up with that in a second. And that's why we're so attached to our reality, so possessive. And it's absolutely crazy that the human mind can really irritate itself into believing and focusing on 3 attributes, for example. And that we have this very specific, and I don't mean like inside that simulation we give ourselves, but that also life has very specific rules. If you breathe, you will survive. You will have oxygen, so you can create ATP and your cells can thrive. Yeah, what we talked about the entire time, if man and woman get out of line and they lose love as, let's say, the orientation, and they focus on egoism, just on themselves, and they lack of faith, lack of God, maybe you can say, that this is going to result in nihilism, maybe, and destruction. And I can even enumerate way more rules. There's always, sometimes also intellectuals argue about that. Do we live in a simulation? What do you think? That's what I also wanted to talk to you about. And I mean, everything is adding up perfectly. Do we live in a simulation? What is the meaning? Why is it happening? Let's start.
This one is, when I first heard that term a few years ago, I was very bothered by it, very upset by it. And then
yeah, of course, sure.
Totally.
I understand why
because you're questioning your own
mean,
identity, your own existence. And then the more I dug in, and this really went into that question I asked myself about how deep does this go? When you can see that you're in the simulation, especially because you've done psychedelics as well, holy shit, when you can't unsee it, this is absolutely a simulation. You have to understand that quantum physics explains perfectly that science, the way we understand it, we can collectively as humans, because no other creature can read our science and go, yeah, I agree with you. Science can only explain it to a certain degree. And the rest of it is belief and faith. So in this realm,
yes,
when you really explore, did I call this existence in? Am I too stupid in this current existence to really see what's going on here? But when you zoom out, that's my biggest phrase. When you're stuck in a way you're looking at the world, I say change the channel. But when you really want to have your existential being challenged, zoom out. Really zoom out as far as you can. Who are you as a human? Who are you to the contribution of this time on the planet, right? Because you will...
when you go down to the core, yeah.
Like my ebook, like what we've talked about a few different times, but we'll obviously get into now. When you realize you can map out this life as your own video game, is that not a simulation? Is life not an algorithm? Meaning, didn't algorithms get written based on the human experience? And what I mean by that is, my life makes more sense when I eat the same meals at the exact same time. If I go to the gym at the exact same time. Routine and discipline. This is an algorithm. So now reverse it. What if the algorithm was looking at us? We look at it. We create algorithms. Yes, but we are ourselves. Like, where did this come from? So for your question specifically, do I believe this is a simulation? %. Now more than ever. When I heard this, maybe I was bothered by this. I thought people who talk on this level are idiots.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a little bit of a natural defense reaction because that really questions our value and our
our
dignity
ego.
to a certain extent. I mean, it depends how much you dive into it and how you look at that. Let's say if you answered that question with yes, it still depends how you answer the question of the simulation. But from our conditioned point of view, because in the Western world, a lot is about economy, and economy is a lot of about control. And that's why there are also so many wars and power
That's
games
part of the
going
simulation, in my opinion. To me, right now,
And
we are no different than a video game that rich people are playing with our lives. We are just the peasants in their game.
who's testing us, and why are they testing us the way we
You
are operating
mean-
in the moment?
See, again, I would actually disagree with that. You know, if you think about it in your actual reality, right? Now, going back to Stoicism, we suffer more in our thoughts than we do in our reality. You know, there's no war in Thailand, right? There's nothing happening here.
No.
Thailand's never been conquered, right?
No.
And
Yeah,
then
you told me that.
when
never,
I stopped looking at YouTube, when I stopped looking at TikTok, my reality, I actually forgot that there is turmoil in America right now, that there is crisis with this and that. And again, you know, I have the Palestine sticker on my motorcycle helmet. But until I think about that, do I know that there is a war over there? No. Somebody has to tell me that information.
You experience what you focus on, and
Correct.
what you focus
and
on.
so now to go back to what you said, who is messing with us? Well, yes, there are people, the media conglomerates, and they own the story. And now we're going to get into some controversial shit, which I'm okay with. You're going to get a lot of viewers if they listen to this part. The concept of money and then the idea of money, right? Because it's just an illusion, right? We have assigned a dollar value to a piece of paper.
Yeah, for sure.
Correct.
It's not infinite. It's not infinitely declared.
And
It's
who
an
owns
invention.
the invention? A family called the Rothschilds. So if they own the money and they own the system, they own us. But if you unsubscribe from the system, the game is over. So no different than...
Yeah, they
Correct.
use money
And
to
so
control
when
you.
you and
yes.
I talked about this on our phone call, which I definitely want to let the listeners and the viewers in on this, you asked me about time. And I said, when I came to this location in November, I started to sync with the moon, 27-day rotation. Everything in my life started to make sense from that point forward. You had asked about the zodiac signs, but I took it as if zodiac is where you find your identity, where you find how you want to live, how you want to experience this experience, then go with zodiac. My response to you was, I decided that the lunar calendar was more correct to me because coincidentally, since I've lived in Thailand for 3 years, I don't know why, but every time there's a full moon, I know to just look up and find it. I don't know what day it is, but I know that it's a full moon. My body tells me it's a full moon.
So you're saying by let's say sticking to the moon calendar, you get back more to the intuitive natural roots.
I
Is that what
feel
you're trying
more
to say?
aligned with who I am, which needs no justification, because that's the other part. When we go back to identity now, we feel like we have to justify who we are for social likability, social cohesion. If you actually remove that just for thinking purposes, you can go back to your family group, your friend group, whatever you want, but remove it and just think on your own. When I started to realize I can shape who I want to be, how I want to be, how I want to speak, how I want to look, the only pushback I get from that is my own thought about what other people who I care about will say. But since I've been in Thailand and I reinvent myself every, I don't know.
You haven't
Correct.
given a fuck since then.
But then I needed some sort of metric to base my existence off of. And I told you that the only time I am reminded of this calendar that we all subscribe to is for financial reasons. What day is rent due? What day?
Yes. Interesting point. Very, very,
Right.
very enlightening and good point. It's very
Thank
crucial
you.
for
And
people to
that's what I want to
understand.
get across to the viewers. And that's what I want to get across to you, because as you and I saw you in an identity struggle when I met you. And when I told you you didn't do anything wrong, it's because you were born into a system that you don't identify with it. You knew that probably at the conception of your birth, but you really started to figure that out when you were at school.
Battle between my potential and my conditioning, two
No
roles
different
fighting
than those.
against each other. Fighting for the resources of attention and validation on just belief of which one is ever
And I
more.
think you just answered the breakdown of the male-female dynamic, whether it's dating, family, or life in general. Who is competing for the spotlight? Your potential should never have to compete for the spotlight, but your conditioning, because again, what did we talk about that happens identically in Germany and in America? Oh, well, I bought a new Mercedes. Oh, well, I bought a new Mercedes too. These people in Thailand,
Cool,
you
bro.
hear people talk about it, and the Thai people go, oh, cool, whatever. You have Mercedes? Is it here? No? Well, whatever.
It really fills me with, I don't want to insult anyone, but it fills me with disgust when I see those suicidal, not suicidal. It can be suicidal for the soul. But when I see those power games, look, Paul, I bought a new Mercedes. Oh, Walter, I bought an Alfa Romeo. Oh, yeah, we bought a new house. So, new point, what I really observed in Germany, people do not enter relationships in order to gain a human experience from it. It's a power game. And I can tell that because, how do I say that? I know people who hang out with people who exactly do that, especially the wealthier people. I mean, they don't admit it because they're not aware of it, but I can
I don't
tell
think,
that it's just a fucking, I am better than you. They just use each other in order to feel better. They take advantage. They pretty much go behind other people's back and they stab them in their back. That's what's going on. It's not a friendship. They're being traitors and just self-serving and, how do you say, loyal
2
to
points.
themselves.
I don't think rich people even have to acknowledge it because they all know how the game is played. Part 2, let's let your listeners in on something, and maybe this is something you'll get to learn about cultures as well. In India specifically, but of people who are an extension of the Indian subcontinent, whatever, marriage is referred to as marriage. A love marriage is where you have to tell the person, oh, they didn't commit to what the family wanted. They committed to love. Think about that irony. If you love somebody and you said, oh, this is my wife, this is my husband, you would automatically assume in the Western world, oh, well, they love each other. They got married for love. But in India, if you say, this is my wife, this is my husband, oh, we got married, then they start asking about the property. Well, what's in the dowry? Who got the cows? Did these two families merge through this marriage and now they have more land? So in the Indian caste system, which has always been about money and class and status.
Sources, to break it down easily, money is just a concept in order to distribute resources, to represent resources, but it's about resources by the end of the day, to illustrate that in the most easy way to understand.
So we live in a timeline, meaning like you and I live in this simulation timeline. The timeline that we're in, you can easily label as the exploitation of people's greediness. Because people like you and I, like I live in a nice place, but I don't own any of this stuff. And for me, that is perfect. I pay $250 a month. They clean the room. Oh, yeah.
That's so cheap, man. With my mates, when I went to Thailand, we paid $450 for a 70 square meter house.
They clean the room every 2 weeks, but I own none of this stuff. The bed is theirs, the end table is theirs, everything is theirs. But what I like about that is I don't get my identity from this shit. But people in this modern world, in this simulation we're in, I don't know about Germany, but in America, the big thing that you can do to show off your wealth, especially on Instagram, is how nice your kitchen remodel is. You know, as long as my kitchen is functional and clean and nice and like sanitary, I'm good. And remember, my dad's a chef. And I'm still like, yeah, cool, whatever. Oh yeah, we used to have an Italian restaurant. Okay. Hey, we're just here to break the stereotypes, my friend. So The thing about marriage, though, you're absolutely right. This is the frustrating part for people like you and I, listeners of your podcast who have enjoyed this so far, is we know the truth. This existence is transactional, and that is fucking frustrating. I don't want the only conversations I ever have in my day when people are kind to me is when I'm transacting with them. Are you having a good day?
You're pretty much getting, you can also, from an energetic point of view,
100%.
it's exploitation. They're stealing something from you.
And remember,
Energy suckers.
definitely, we use
or what
this
you
phrase
call
in
them.
America as well. And remember what I told you, right? 11 years of counseling, 4 different counselors over that time. But the first counselor said it to me. If you want to see your worth in this world, you really want to see your essence reflected back to you, look at the way children and look at the way animals look at you. Because they're the only creatures that have not been conditioned yet. They're the only things that have not been transacted yet, right? A puppy looks at you, a cat looks at you, a bird will come and land, a butterfly will come and land, not because you're going to give it something, not because you have a Snickers bar and they need it. A baby will look at you just because you have a nice smile or your eyes are glowing. Correct. And that is what we lack in the world today. Love now comes with conditions.
But that's not love. That is that's an excuse for people so they don't need to confess.
Yeah, it's back to the insecurities, right? Go back to what we said about in school. I was happy and comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't know means that somebody has to unpack it for me. But we live in see, again, this is all about exploitation. We live in such a fast-paced world that people don't have time to say, I don't know. They would rather be wrong than not have the answer. I'd rather not have the answer and take the time to figure it out. But people don't have time anymore.
Yeah, people also claim knowledge for themselves. That's also why it is very, very hard nowadays to have a deep, honest, and diverse, critical discussion on certain topics, especially topics that are socially not accepted. And egos of people, especially in societies of more intellectual people, they are really bound and really focused on being right. I mean, I also have an ego, and of course, I mean, you delve or you verge towards that, but I mean, so one thing I wanted to say around an hour ago, people have a very deterministic mindset, and therefore the childish exploration without any judgment and expectation completely goes havoc and completely is being missed in this world. And we want to own, and that might also come through the fact that we own. It's biological reasons, but then a combination of, let's say, to gain prosperity and to keep that prosperity, holding on to something. And that by the end of the day destroys the entire experience.
Okay, I completely agree. Now I'm going to add a layer. If that was the cake, this is the icing. When I saw you in your struggle, when we met at the hostel, I could see what you were doing. And what I needed to tell you in that moment was, you didn't do anything wrong. And by removing that vice that you have, again, whoever put it there, whether your own thoughts put it there, you were caged in a prison. But when you go as far as I've gone in this exploration, I mean, even to the point that I write down notes on my mirror that I told you, right? There's no whiteboard here, so I just write dry erase notes to myself on my mirror. When you get to the point of your own self-discovery, I said to you, you didn't do anything wrong. But when you can look at yourself in the mirror, look directly in your eyes and go, man, I fucked up, and smile about it, it all comes together. Because when you can be self-critical, but in a compassionate way, when you can be self-compassionate in a critical way, when it matters, do you see how fucked up we are? Our programming has been reversed on purpose. You need to be compassionate all the fucking time, but it needs to be put in the critical areas where you need it. Your ego doesn't need to be stroked because the new Mercedes is glistening. Maybe you just needed a new car, and the new car makes it easier for you to drive to your stupid job, whatever. But when it comes to self-compassion in a critical way, or self-critical, but in a compassionate way, meaning I recognize I just didn't want to be the person I was anymore. And that when I was young, when I was depressed, when I was ADHD, when I was like cutting myself with razor blades, I had
You were
deep
cutting
depression,
yourself?
my friend. So it's a lot of self-hatred because
Self-hatred?
that phrase kept playing in my head. I don't want to live. And then what I realized is when I journaled, I would finish the sentence without thinking it. I don't want to live as this person. Well, who is this person? This person is getting their identity from the people who give them the feedback. My mom hates me. My dad hates me. My culture hates me. White America hates me. My neighborhood hates me. Again, breaking stereotypes. We grew up playing ice hockey. These ice hockey players didn't like me. So, okay, if I hear that enough, then I don't like myself. So
Yes.
Self-love, self-compassion, self-critical, I was able to change the things I wanted to change. But instead of changing it from a negative standpoint, I changed it from a positive standpoint. I mean, again, you can even tell by the way, like my eyes glow now, like I smile all the time for no reason. Like we're mocking people. Thank you.
You
And
seem
remember,
sane.
I used to be insane according to the tests.
What I wanted to add, so I'm going through that process right now, also accompanied by the podcast, and apparently it brings up insecurities. And so I told you that when I text people to invite them to the podcast and they don't answer, that triggers me. So I feel disvalidated. And I thought about it, and okay, if you dive down that rabbit hole and you ask yourself, why am I suffering from that so much? Why do I want to be successful? And you realize that it's a conditioning and that it's not your own value system and that you already
Correct.
complete and whole, then the entire perspective completely changes. Because how does your spirit change by earning some money? How does your spirit change by going from 3 to 15,000 Instagram followers? How do you change? How does your seed change by getting something in the external world? It does not change. It's an illusion. It's a lie you're telling yourself. You're deceiving yourself.
That's
into
exactly what
freaking
it
hell.
is. So remember, if the podcast is important to you because it has some value at the end, that's transactional. But if somebody asks you why you're doing a podcast, your response can literally be because podcast. That's it. This is a blast. I'm having fun. We're not exchanging any money. We're just having a good time talking bullshit and enjoying life because if you assign a dollar value to it, which is a part of the conditioning, this is what I mean. We have entered into a timeline. We are all a part of this portal where your time is worth money, where your experience has to be validated. You're nothing if you don't have so much on your CV. And then if you just float through life, oh, you're one of these eclectic, you're one of these hippies. No, I'm just a person that went to school to be a car designer. Then I did business. Then I started a car dealership. Then I ran my parents' restaurant. Then I was like, I want to be a digital nomad. Then you know this. I became an actor for a year. I still want to be an actor, but if it's going to be this difficult, I'd rather just be digital nomad or online marketer. I only need...
What's going on with the acting right now? And you can finish your point if you want to. And then
all I was going to say about the rest
question.
of that was people like us that have the freedom, and the freedom is removing ourselves from this prison because the prison is the thoughts. If somebody says something negative to us, we also have the choice. This is consent. Does what this person saying to me confirm or oppose my own belief about myself? And if I don't want to hear anything negative, I can just hear it, but let it pass, right? This is part of counseling as well. You have to view thoughts as clouds. You are the vastness of the sky. And this thought, correct, and this thought has just passed by. So if somebody's like, oh, you're ugly, put it on the cloud, there it goes, and I'm back. But like you said, if this podcast, if this Instagram follower changes who I am as my spirit, that means you need to get in contact with your spirit. You need to make sure your spirit, your soul is unshakable, changeable on your conditions, not society's, not the external world. In terms of acting, so, I started with as an extra as White Lotus season 3. That will be released in about 9 days' time. So I need to get the clips that I'm in and put together an acting reel as far as my extra work is concerned. Then I did the French film Hell in Paradise, where I only had a few speaking lines, support cast, definitely wasn't main cast. I need to get the spoken roles from there. I need to cut that into an edit. Then in my Kazakhstanian film, where I was the Thai police officer, where I spoke the most.
I saw the
Pretty good,
WhatsApp
right?
picture on your profile a couple
And I look
months
so
ago.
different now, right?
I was
Totally.
like,
A
what is
lot of
he up
people were like,
to?
what the fuck is this? Even my mom was like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know how to
Okay,
explain.
internet is gone once again. We need to
Oh,
wait.
looks like we're connecting again.
You gotta be back.
All right, are we back? Yep, we're back.
You back?
Yeah,
I
no
need to do
worries.
some cutting.
And so
That's
the
gonna be fun.
Kazakhstanian film, it was released on Christmas in Kazakhstan, but it won't be streaming until next month. And when I finally have all of these things together, this is called an acting reel. When I put this together, I can send this to agents, I can send this to China, I can send this to Japan, and perhaps get to play something unique. Because what I realize in my experience is, as soon as I put myself in Bangkok, there's a lot of good looking people in Bangkok. There's a lot of good looking Indian people in Bangkok. And I just thought I was going to show up and be like, hey, you want the Indian American guy for all of your commercials? And then I saw 50 other good looking dudes and was like, damn it. So I need to put myself in a unique situation because of my unique situation, right? I speak like this. I look like this. This is one of one. If they need the typical Indian guy for a car commercial, for a sporting commercial, they're probably not going to pick me because I don't look normal, right? So I'm hopeful for future gigs in more fun stuff. But if it doesn't happen, again, 2024 was the greatest year of my life, and I plan on making 2025 even better. So if acting comes up, great. And if it doesn't, I'm just going to keep going with these ebooks because, as you know, as I've said, I haven't released it yet. When that marketing campaign rolls out, I'll definitely let you know. But the same way you are using this podcast to bring your insecurities and your issues to the top, to the surface, and to address them, me writing these ebooks is doing that for me. I have found deep therapy and deep healing in just letting it all out there, right? Telling the truth, because I'm not afraid of myself.
Yeah, I think what also happens very often is I also that the biggest problem is that we feel too ashamed to let the shame come up
That's the
to the
ego.
surface.
That's the ego.
Yeah, weakness. Oh,
That's
you
what I
being
mean
weak.
about when I said, so go back to what I said earlier. When I said to you, I know what you're doing. You are not giving yourself self-compassion. So here's a virtual hug. You didn't do anything wrong. Put that aside. When you go fast forward and you start going through all of this, you let all of this come to the surface. Hey, do I speak too loud on the podcast? Do I look okay? What do my listeners think? When you let all of this shit go, when you get to be self-critical in a way that you laugh at yourself and go, man, why do I do that? Why do I say so much? Then yeah,
Yeah, it often that if you are attached to a certain outcome and you are mentally bound to dependencies, it feels like that there's a huge stone bound to your legs with change that pulls you beneath the surface of the water and
do you
makes
know
you
this
drown.
song by Queen? Freddie Mercury sang it perfectly, which is I Want to Break Free. It's fantastic. Just the hook alone. I want to break free. Just think about that from the mental hangups. Think about that from the emotional hangups. My goal, my gift to the world with my ebooks, and I think for you with your podcast, is to give people some sort of reassurance that it is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Give
To
people perspective.
live authentically.
Because
Yeah,
they
live
don't
authentically.
have perspective.
Let it come to the surface. The perspective will come because trust me, everything you think, everything you desire is in you. If you turn your eyes inside out, you could actually see that you are the universe. That's how you break. That's how you break out of the matrix too. Because if you stay in the matrix, you're just a social security number. You're just a UPC number. But if you break out, this is all yours. All of it.
Yeah, I also observed that in myself so I saw a reel yesterday that what I'm going to align to, he didn't 100% say that, but you can perfectly contextualize what he said yesterday to what I'm to the point that I want to make right now, that as a child, if you get brought up and you never can explore the world and never can gain confidence, you're going to be lost in the world. You cannot meet any decisions on your own. You cannot give yourself the allowance to think critically, to take your own positions, to be yourself, to, pretty much experience existence. Because you've always been, for example, that guy said is, if you always listen to your parents, if you're always the good child, right? If you're always obedient, you're going to struggle a lot in life later on as it comes to the embracement of your human potential.
100%
in the long
because
run.
you'll be living somebody else's
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, and that's what also is what parents really, really get wrong is they look, I mean, I said that in the beginning of the podcast, they look at children through the lens of themselves. And that, what I want to say, that, no, lost track again. No, what they just, they punish children to be something they are not, and that has very devastating effects. Okay, what I wanted to say is they don't see what children need, and they feel offended by children. They're just being children, they're being innocent, they're doing nothing wrong. But because the parents have been conditioned already, and ironically also, that shows how inconsistent that entire game is that parents are doing, is they also used to be children. That's how much, that really stresses and emphasizes how far away they are from their original point and how much
100%.
they're
And I think
struggling.
I might have mentioned this, and if not, this is where I get to drop another gem. There is a phrase that says, watch the way you speak to your children because your voice becomes their inner voice. So when people
Yes,
go out in
very
the
good
world,
point.
especially our boy Olaf, who you know I love, that's my brother, when he says stuff and I actually ask him, is this you? Or did somebody tell you this about yourself? And you can tell when he has that little existential crisis where he's like, oh, you're right, I don't believe this. And when we were at that
Sure.
hostel, I told him, don't you have more evidence in life that your life is working out? I mean, you're here in Thailand, you're doing your thing, you're meeting wonderful people. So yet there's some narrative running in the background that you're not good enough. You'll fuck this up. But if you have evidence that you didn't fuck it up, then who's the voice telling you fucked up? Is that your parent? Is that somebody you looked up to in your childhood that you believed everything that they said?
Someone who was supposed to be a role model, but who was not able
Correct.
to perform as a role model. But perform is the wrong word, to enact, to embody, and also visualize
And then as you
being a
perfectly,
role model. Yeah, it's because parents
and I
carry a
think
lot
you
of
put
guilt
it
with
perfectly
themselves.
too. Unresolved parents were unresolved children. And they project that shit onto their child.
Yeah.
The child, again, as I said to you, you did nothing wrong. The parent's lens is, well, you used to talk too much when you were a kid. Yeah, but I'm only a kid now. So that's the parent attaching to something that happened 30 years ago in their life, and they project that onto their own kid. That's how much is wound up in that.
I wanted to make another point, but I cannot recall it right now.
I'm also happy. I was also going to say, I'm also
can
happy
keep
to be
talking.
not only your first guest, but I can be your second guest if you don't have somebody else. We can definitely keep these to 2 hours because I think we just crossed 2 hours. However, we do have, I think, that first few minutes, which was just pure gold.
Yeah, I mean, we've been just talking for 2 hours, and what I thought is to have you as the first guest is very, I mean, it's very good because I don't think that I could have a better guest. I know you a little bit, and I mean, you're very intellectual, you're very authentic, you're very sane, and I think the topics we talked about
I
bear
appreciate that.
a
And
lot
you
of
know
value.
why I agreed to this. It's not just because, hey, this is a great way to keep in touch with a friend. I see the potential in you. I know what you're capable of. And if I'm the first, then I hope that I'm the first of many because this is people like us need to hear stuff like this so that we are reassured that we are walking the path correctly. Because as I said to you, I've had many counselors and they've all said the same thing. People like me, I will say people like you, people like the listeners, we are machetes. Our path is not predetermined. We have to go there and we have to cut. So sometimes I get lost. Sometimes I have to remember, why am I even doing this? Why am I committing to the gym at my age? Why am I committing to acting? Why am I committing to Thailand? And then I look around at my reality and I go, holy shit, this is where I want to be. This is, like I said earlier, don't go where you're tolerated. Go where you're celebrated. Correct.
Go where you belong.
And if that's the whole fucking earth, then please go see it. Because what's funny is, don't believe everything on mainstream media. The world is actually beautiful. There are amazing people in it, such as the people on the screen right now. We met some amazing people when we were in Thailand. And yeah, we met some shitheads too. Let them be. Give them compassion and let them go.
So I have
Let's
an
do it.
important question to bring up about reality. And so, I mean, apparently in the last few years, a lot of negative stuff, existential stuff happened. We had the pandemic, we had the vaccination, we had defamation of a lot of people's psychological war, inflation. Also, since COVID popped up 5 years ago, let's say diseases, chronic diseases have skyrocketed. And in all that time, that presents pretty much to me that we kind of live in a nihilistic way, like what we've been talking about. People have lost sense and meaning. Sense guides you to meaning. So we might, and I'm not going to conclude that, but it might be that we live in a nihilistic time that has also been caused by the fact that wealth and prosperity has increased and that everything got way too convenient. And by that, our brains, as we talked in the beginning, in the first few minutes, were not able to adapt. And that gap that has been torn causes nihilism, maybe as a compensation mechanism, because we got to go somewhere now, at least in our mind, because that simulation always needs to walk somewhere. And I lost track.
But you said you had a question within that. So where were you going with that? Because I'm very interested.
Okay, yeah, I got it. When something is apparently negative, how to stay realistic but not have a predominant negative confirmation bias against anything in the world. What I mean in easy terms is that you don't look at the world too negative, even though a lot of challenging stuff is going on. What would you do? How realistic are people, even though they're trying to be as honest as possible? And what's the best way to navigate through that?
So you have to go back to Stoicism. I'm going to get the quote wrong, but it's basically, you know you're good when you can keep a level head when the world has lost its collective mind. Remember, who you are. You're not this body. This is a physical representation of a spirit inside of you. But what is that spirit? That spirit is the observer, being able to observe. I can see, I can hear, I can taste, I can speak, I can feel. Right now, the world is in a very existential crises, actual crises everywhere. It's because people are buying into the collective narrative. So you or I have to be the voice that objects that. Because if we've touched on the same topic that keeps coming back around, it's love, it's self-love, and our currency, like we owe our existence a little bit of kindness, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of time. And, Eckhart Tolle, the Buddha, they talk about this. The past is a perception. The future is a projection. The present, correct.
Prediction
but
based
the
on the
present
past.
is called the present because it's a present.
I thought about
you
that
get
yesterday.
no moment.
Ironically.
Like right now, you and I, we've been on this podcast 2 hours, but we've been chatting before that. This is fun and enlightening. I'm getting to know you better. You're getting to know me better, how the brain works, how we could agree on many things.
It's going better for me than I assumed, because I thought I would be very nervous and maybe also a little ashamed. I mean, there were some phases where I cannot recall. But
do you
still,
know that even when I was
well.
doing the acting stuff, even as an amateur, but like somebody who's trying to impress, there were multiple times I had to look at the director and be like, line, or can we call cut? I need to remember this. It's going to happen. That's why editing. See, this is also part of the conditioning. All of the programming that we've ever watched on our phone or when we were kids, when we watched on TV, was cut so perfectly and precise to make you believe that life has no fundamental flaws. Most of life is a fundamental flaw. And the objective for the human experience is to go and clean it up. That's what I mean.
Let's say the belief in perfection
100%
causes
because
imperfection.
Correct.
That's a
Definitely.
causal relation.
So once you let it go, you'll actually realize how perfect it is. You said it as, if you're concerned with the outcome, you might not even get started. So if you're so worried about holding on to perfection, it's never going to be. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I have a tattoo on my left hand. It's Japanese calligraphy for kintsugi, right? Kintsugi is golden joinery. When porcelain breaks, you're supposed to actually pick up the pieces and put it all back together. And instead of hiding the glue and the cracks, you inflect the resin with golden joinery. Well, why I got this tattoo was I was holding on to this toxic version of myself, this identity that we were talking about earlier. And when I came to Thailand and I finally just let it go, I rebuilt my bowl. But now my bowl, I pick what's in there. Holy shit. When I let go of perfection, when I let go of believing that I would be a better person if my mom liked me more, if I lived up to her standard, if I lived up to cultural standards. The fucked up part is when I go around Thailand and I meet people who like to stereotype, whether they're Thai or whether they're foreigners. Well, I think you're an Indian man. I think you're just here for the sex tourism. You're basing me off of a label instead of the content of my character. I
mean, that's also how
Correct.
evolutionary the brain works, because it's easier to classify for the sake of security and survival. But we still have the ability.
Correct. And that's to
counteract
answer your
that.
question. Each individual needs to work on, identify, and fall in love with their own soul. And then let go of any preconceived notions that you've ever believed before that healing, because it's all programming. When you go out in the world and people talk shit to you and you feel the way I feel these days, where it's just like, cool, you have an opinion. I know you think about me this way because you were told to think about me this way. I don't even think about you because I have healed. If you're on my radar, you're probably good people.
But they assume that you're judging them.
That
That's
goes
a
back
big
to the
irony,
unhealed
yeah.
self. That goes back to childhood. Because we fear, what is it? The quote goes, we buy stuff we don't even want with money we haven't even earned to impress people we don't even like. So when people ask me about my place, I love this place. It's aesthetically pleasing. Do I own it? No. Do I own anything in here? No, only the stuff I brought in my bag. Am I good with it? Yes, because I don't identify with any of this shit. But if the other person fears that I'm judging them because they don't have this, that's on them, not on me. I can't solve that internal problem. But remember what I said. If the child looks at...
Yeah, I think the point you also keep making is to understand and to give yourself credit that it's not your fault what other people are doing or in which way they are performing. To separate from that guilt and to more swerve into... how do you say, own reliability or
Correct.
own accountability.
This is what it is. Religion, government, theology, this is to control your mind because you have consented to, I don't trust my own thoughts. Then there are people like me who are like, I don't like these rules. I know the difference between right and wrong. I don't want to be violent with anybody or anything. I don't want to scorch the earth. I don't want to go to war. I'll self-govern. But within that self-governance comes a lot of responsibility. You have to know that sometimes somebody's going to give you a fucked up look and you didn't do anything. Or you might have given somebody a fucked up look, but you're not even looking at them. You yourself are dealing with something and you're just giving a fucked up look. But the individual needs to be present, because if you think about that, if we all participated in a little bit more presentness, you would see that I was happy, you'd be happy. You would see that I was upset, you would be upset, and then you would want to do something about it. My friend, that is actually how we met. We stayed in that same dorm bunk room, but I saw you, I looked at you, and I was like, this kid is in a struggle. So you spoke, and I listened to you, and I could hear you repeating the same pattern. And that's when I said what I said. In that moment, I needed nothing. I didn't care if you thought I was India man, if you thought I was a good person, a bad person, if I smelled a certain way or whatever. I just saw that somebody needed something, and I gave them the best that I could. And then fast forward, here we are. That's presentness. If we all participated a little bit more, the world would be selfless and we could all get and have what we wanted.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see how easy it is to bond with other people. Because when you map out, for example, you want to do a podcast, or you go to other different places and you go there by yourself. Oh, you're going to be alone all the time. It's so easy to meet people if they are the people who are on
That's
the
what I mean.
same energetic
That's what I
level,
mean. You will always find your
align as
people.
you.
You will always find your people.
I mean, we haven't talked for like 8 months, and I
Exactly.
contacted you 3 weeks ago. Since then, I mean, we interacted 3 times. We talked a little bit on WhatsApp, not much. Then we didn't talk for 7 months or something like that. So now we've been talking a little bit. We had a phone call on Monday, and now we've been talking for 2 hours and something. It's often our mind abstracts things into a ridiculous difficulty
That's what I
that
mean.
doesn't exist.
If you are finding problems in your head and in the outside world, that means you've mismanaged the program. But if you find things that just sync and work, then you're going with the flow. You're going with the stream. This was easy for us. This is how it should be.
Yes, that's how it should be. I actually don't have much more to say now. Like,
yeah,
I'm also
a little bit too. Yeah, we've been
tired,
chatting for, I mean, at this point, almost 2.5 hours, but you've got a lot of footage to go through. So, enjoy that.
Okay? Yeah, I will stop the recording now.